Hi, and welcome to the Newbery Chronicles. This is a podcast where two readers go through every Newbery Medal winning book and then we talk about it. I'm Michael, and my voice has been kind of on the fritz the last few days, so hopefully it holds out this podcast with my co host,
Rebecca, with a very strong voice.
Yeah, Rebecca's voice is going strong.
It's always the strongest voice on this podcast.
Yes. Well, anyway, today we are talking about Johnny Tremain, which is the 1944 Newbery Medal winning book written by Esther Forbes. And so we'll be talking about that one after we talk about the books that we've been reading recently. And by recently, we do mean the last few months that we've not been doing a Newbery podcast. So, Rebecca, what have you been reading since early August?
I read what I am sure will be my favorite book that I read this year. I don't think I will read a book better than this one this year.
Big claim.
I read The Forbes-midable by Barbara Kingsolver. And I know that book has been out for ages and has been on people's radar for ages. And I have loved Barbara Kingsolver for a very long time. However, The Forbes-midable is not on audiobook through Libby, which is where I listen to a lot of things. So I have not been able to read this one yet, except when we were in Philadelphia, I found it in a used bookstore and read it. And it was absolutely incredible. I think it's very thought-provoking. It really speaks to just timeless themes of, unfortunately, they're timeless because they've been going on for so long and they're still going on, of just colonialist powers and the damage that does to indigenous peoples and to entire landscapes of populations. So this book is written through the perspective of the wife and daughters of this missionary who goes to Africa and tries to save all these souls, but doesn't really pay attention to the needs and fears of the people.
Am I remembering right, it's the Congo?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the Congo. And anyway, Barbara Kingsolver did years and years and years of research, going into this. She was also the daughter of, I don't think that they were missionaries, but her parents, and she lived in the Congo when she was younger. And she also, thanks her parents for not being like these people that she wrote in the book. But just her time of living there then gave her, a natural curiosity for the history and what white people actually did in the Congo, and how they led the assassination of some of their leaders. And
does it talk about Lumumba?
Yeah, he's in there.
That's about all I know.
It's brilliant. Everything that she writes is very well written, but the story is very compelling. You can tell the amount of time that she put into this book. I'm talking decades of research and just really a very intricate, complicated story that she does it very well and honors, I think, the history of the people in the Congo. And it's just very, very good. I was very moved by it. I also read A Great Reckoning by Louise Penny. Inspector Gamache is in a different position than chief inspector in this book. He's leading basically the Quebec Police Academy and trying to filter through the corruption and trying to see below the surface and uncover some abuse that's going on by the leader toward the cadets. And also, of course, there's a murder that they're solving. So that one was pretty good. I read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I guess is how you say her name.
I love that last name. What an incredible last name.
Skloot. This is a work of nonfiction about a woman named Henrietta Lacks who has cervical cancer, but her cells are intercepted without her consent and then are used in all the scientific research for years and years and years after Henrietta dies. And so her cells are still being used for research and learning things, but it's this very in-depth journalism about what consent means and how science can profit off of things, but not like the people themselves whose lives were impacted by this. And she's also telling the story of Henrietta and her family. It was a very beautiful book. It's very scientific, but it's also like very accessible. And then there's also a movie made about it, like I don't know when it was made, but Oprah's in it and some other people that I can't remember right now. I have not seen the movie, but the book was very good. And then I read A Man Called Uva by Frederick Bachman. There's also a movie made from this book, but they actually changed the name of the main character, changed it to Otto. This was a novel about like an older man who has lost his wife and is like struggling with depression and is continually contemplating and planning how he's going to die, but then has like this whole community of people that rally around him in very like mundane ways and help him find beauty in his life. So it was a sweet little story. It was really good. That's all I read.
Nice.
Short list.
I have read about the same number as you. So I read, I guess I'll go in order of...
Oh, wait. I just remembered one more that I didn't put on the list.
Okay.
I just finished, I think, now I can't remember the title. I think it's called The Puppets of Spellhorst by Kate DiCamillo. I just read this book with my son. So I accomplished a major feat. Michael and I both accomplished a major feat with our 6-year-old son, that we finished this Pokemon encyclopedia that he would make us read for bedtime.
And then we promptly lost it.
I told him, well, that wasn't intentional, but I told him, I said, when we finish this, this took us months. I said, when we finish this, I get to pick the book. And of course, I picked a Kate DiCamillo book, and he loved it. He was enraptured. It's this beautiful story about these 5 puppets and their journey to figuring out like what their purpose is in the world, and their purpose is to tell a beautiful story, and these people along the way that help them find that purpose. And everything that Kate touches is golden, and it was really fun to like read this with my son and watch him be very engaged in it. When a lot of the chapter books he's read thus far have like a lot of illustrations or like are very simplistic, and this one had some illustrations, but mostly it was the narrative. So to watch him like engage in that and fall in love with her writing as I have was a really moving experience. And now it's his turn to pick, and we are reading Dogman. It's Grime and Punishment.
Grime and Punishment.
So anyway,
just as Dostoevsky envisioned.
Yes. It's your turn.
Okay, so now I have read fewer books than you, since you included that one. That's per usual. So I read one nonfiction book and a few novels. I'll start with the nonfiction book. It's called Black Pill: How I Witnessed the Darkest Corners of the Internet Come to Life, Poison Society, and Capture American Politics. And this is by an author named Ellie Reeve, who now works for CNN, but I became aware of her when she worked for Vice, which is a website, or Vice News, I guess, and she covered, I first noticed her covering like the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, and covering a lot of the like alt-right stuff, you know, where you basically had a bunch of like neo-Nazis and otherwise like, you know, white supremacists or far-right figures kind of making their first forays into mainstream American politics, surrounding the first election of Donald Trump and stuff. This is a book that is basically about the online growth of like that sort of subculture, which is something that she's, you know, given, you know, her whole career is based around it at this point, basically. But it is honestly like, you know, some of the stuff is like, if you pay attention to this stuff, not super surprising. You know, she talks about Gamergate, she talks about Unite the Right, she talks about like the election of Donald Trump, she talks about January 6th, you know, all the kind of like highlights that, you know, if you are a person who has been concerned about this stuff, you've probably heard of at least some of those things. But what I thought was really interesting about this was that is basically biographical sketches of a bunch of these figures, including Richard Spencer, including the guy who created 8chan, which is an online forum that a lot of this stuff came out of, including a few other, fairly notable figures in like this, kind of insurgent far-right movement in American politics. And because she's been covering it for so long, she has this weird sort of rapport with a bunch of these right-wing guys who give her incredible access, I think. Like for instance, like Richard Spencer's ex-wife just gives her all these internet, like email exchanges that she and Richard Spencer had with like Russian, diplomats, and like all the correspondences within the alt-right movement and things like that. And so a lot of it is quite depressing, obviously, because it's about the ascendancy of Nazis and ilk, that sort of ilk into mainstream American society, and how a lot of our mainstream political discourse now is like poisoned by this stuff. But in some ways, it is very human and weirdly tender. A big part of a lot of these subcultures, or at least one of the subcultures, is people being incels. Which is a term which means involuntary celibate, like this kind of identity some people adopt online, usually men, that, basically boils down to they've not had sex and they become resentful at women. There's been, like mass shootings connected to these folks, but mostly just a lot of online people who are depressed. And she talks about like how, like, what does it do to people within these communities when they do have sex and they kind of lose their community within the incel community and stuff like that. That I think is like, interesting and thoughtful and like, like I said, biographical. So that was pretty good, depressing. So non-nonfiction. So I guess fiction that I read. I read one called, this is actually a play that's currently kind of making the rounds in like theater circles, and I believe is like a front runner for Tonys, or perhaps is already won a Tony. I don't know. I don't pay attention to very much to like contemporary theater, but it's a play called John Proctor is the Villain by Kimberly Bellflower, which I read because the book is about a high school English class that reads the play The Crucible by Arthur Miller, which is a play that I also teach, and so I was interested in, is this going to give me insight or material that I could maybe draw on when I'm teaching The Crucible. And I would say it doesn't really give that, but it is kind of an interesting counter narrative to The Crucible, because the events that transpire in this high school classroom and within this community of people have, are echoing some of the things that happen with The Crucible, right? So you have kind of like The Crucible, a group of girls who share secrets with each other. You have a group of adults who have their own kind of like grievances and politics, and the ways that those adult worlds and the worlds of teenage girls interact is really interesting. And, one criticism sometimes people make of The Crucible is that it seems like Arthur Miller is kind of vindictive about these girls in a way that's not really historical. Like a lot of the characters, he kind of either invents whole cloth or changes them substantially from how they were actually in the Salem witch trials. But, the girls are in a lot of ways very villainous and duplicitous in The Crucible. Whereas in the play, John Proctor's the Villain, there's some similar things happen in The Crucible. No one is accused of being a witch, but like it is at the height of like the Me Too era. It's like pointedly set in like, it's like 2017 or 2018 or something, like when like the characters talk about Me Too having occurred. And so there are like Me Too allegations, because a lot of this mirrors like accusations of witchcraft in The Crucible, but it's much more sympathetic to like, why would the girls make accusations like this? Or, what kind of power dynamics exist between grown men and teenage girls, and like those sorts of things that like The Crucible does interact with, but this one does so with maybe more of an eye toward like the point of view of the teenage girls rather than the play, which is I think more interested in the point of view of the adults for the most part. And it was pretty good. It's a good, fun read. I don't think it's as good a play as The Crucible. The Crucible is a very ambiguous play. It's really unclear. Like what you're supposed to think of the morality of the actions that are taken, things like that. Whereas John Proctor's The Villain is fairly clear about like its moral perspective, and I don't think that that's bad, but I think it would make it less interesting to talk about in a class. So I would not probably bring this into my high school classroom, but I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I'm in touch with contemporary theatre at least once. And then the other two books I'll talk about together that I read. These are both novels. I read the first two books in what's called the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. I think it's actually no longer a trilogy. I think earlier this year or last year he made a fourth book. But whatever the case, I read Annihilation, which is the first book, and I read Authority, which is the second book. And I think it's called Authority. Yeah, it is. Annihilation was made into a movie, also called Annihilation, and so the premise is kind of the same as the movie, although it's a lot different from the movie. But the premise is this: it's this kind of nebulous, like North American, like it's like the United States government basically has this program called the Southern Reach program. It's like the Office of the Southern Reach or something. And basically, what they've done is there's been this ecological event where there's this zone that they don't know what has caused this zone, but really weird things are going on in the zone. All this wildlife is really diverging in really weird ways. Like things seem like toxic, and they don't know what it is. And so basically, the Southern Reach Zone is responsible for what is happening inside this, or the Southern Reach Office is responsible for what's happening inside this area, and so they send expeditions into this area, and Annihilation is about one of these expeditions, and every expedition ends very poorly. Annihilation is about like the people in this expedition coming to the realization of, oh, this is going to go bad. Our training lied to us about what's in this zone. It's actually really, really dangerous, and we're set up to fail, and etc. And then the second book is about going back. And it takes place entirely within the offices of the Southern Reach Agency. And you get to learn kind of like the bureaucratic backstabbing and stuff that's going on in this organization that is sending these expeditions out. And I thought these were really good and interesting. I think that I enjoyed the second one more, Authority, because the first one is similar enough to the movie that I felt like I kind of understood what was going on a little bit too well, or had expectations that I brought to the book. Whereas the second book, I didn't know what to expect, and it's so completely different from the movie Annihilation that I thought it was really interesting. A lot of it is about like secret keeping. A lot of it is about like within a bureaucracy, like what are the power structures and stuff. So yeah, that's what I've been reading.
All right, let's talk about Johnny Tremain.
Before we talk about Johnny Tremain, let's talk about the woman who wrote Johnny Tremain.
Okay.
So,
talk about old Esther.
Esther.
Okay, do you know I cannot hear the name Esther now without thinking about The Office and Dwight's, like, almost wife?
No. You don't think about the Bible?
Nope.
I thought you were holier than that, Rebecca. The woman who's so sexy, she saves the Jewish people from genocide.
She did. She did a great job.
Yeah. Anyway, this is not either of those Esthers. This is Esther Forbes, who is from Massachusetts. She was born in Westborough, Massachusetts in 1891. Her dad was a math professor at a college in Constantinople.
Oh.
Istanbul, we now call it.
Right.
And he moved to the United States to become a lawyer in Worcester, Massachusetts. Is that how you say it?
I don't know.
One of those places with the English names that I'm not sure how to pronounce. This is why we don't live in New England. I don't know how to pronounce these things. Her mother actually had her own Wikipedia page, so I was interested in her mother. And her mother, according to Wikipedia, this is the quote from Wikipedia, is widely recognized as a pioneering scholar in the study of New English gravestone art.
Oh.
And she wrote one of the early definitive works, maybe the first definitive work on the subject. It's called Gravestones of Early New England and the Men Who Made Them, 1653 to 1800.
It's so obscure.
And it's from 1927. But she's apparently a pioneer in this field of study.
Okay.
And fittingly, her daughter also is, a very well recognized historian for New England history. Um, and apparently her mother helped her a lot with the research for her books and stuff. So I just thought that was interesting. So Esther, though, grew up in Massachusetts and graduated from a junior college in Massachusetts called Bradford Academy, and then went and moved in with her sisters who had gone to Madison, Wisconsin, I believe, attend grad school or something. And she worked on a literary magazine there for a few years before, in 1919, moving back to Massachusetts and began writing for the Boston Evening Transcript, which I gather is a newspaper, and also for Houghton Mifflin, not Dunder Mifflin.
Right.
So this is a different Esther
right.
than The Office. She was an editor at Houghton Mifflin, and in 1926 she married a man named Albert L. Hoskins Jr., who was a lawyer. I don't know
Runs
if she had,
in the family.
Runs in the men in the family, but unfortunately this was not to be. They divorced in 1933, and then the rest of her life, though, she used her married name in like her social life and her work life, but as an author, she used her maiden name as like her author name, which is why we know her as Esther Forbes, who wrote this, and not Esther Hoskins. In 1926, the same year as the divorce, she released her first novel, O Genteel Lady. And I don't know if Book of the Month Club is still kicking around. I know for a while it was kind of a big deal, but it was the second ever Book of the Month selection. So right from the jump, she's having success. The second book, speaking of the Crucible, that she publishes in 1928, it's a book called A Mirror for Witches, which is a novel of historical fiction about the Salem witch trials. And a lot of people read in concert with The Crucible, which Arthur Miller wrote a few decades later. And then in 1933, I said that she wrote her first novel the same year as her divorce. I meant the first year of her marriage, 1926. In 1933, the same year as her divorce, she moved in with her mother. So I guess once she kicked Albert to the curb, she went and lived with her mother in Worcester, whatever, that place in Massachusetts. And afterwards, throughout the 1930s and 40s, she wrote a series of historical fiction novels, and almost all of them are set in colonial New England. It's kind of her niche. I'm sure she had lots of good gravestone primary sources from her mother. One of which, the one that seems most interesting to me, is one that was called The General's Lady in 1938. She published it, and it's about a woman named Bathsheba Spooner, who was the first woman to be executed in the United States following the Declaration of Independence. And she apparently had her husband murdered. He was like beaten to death and threw him down a well. So that sounds interesting. I would read about Bathsheba Spooner. In 1943...
Do you think her name was actually Bathsheba? Or did
they
rename her?
No. I mean, at least this is all according to Wikipedia, okay. But according to Wikipedia...
That's okay. You don't have to get into
it. She was also a loyalist to the British Crown, and some people suspect that the death penalty that she got was not just because she murdered her husband, but also because she was a loyalist, and so they threw the book at her. Anyway, 1943 is a big deal for Our Lady Esther. She won the Pulitzer Prize for History. She wrote a biography of Paul Revere called Paul Revere and the World He Lived In, which was one of the kind of big biographies of Paul Revere for a time. I don't know if it still is. In 1943, she also wrote Johnny Tremain, which includes Paul Revere as a character. Mm-hmm. And she won the following year the Newbery Medal, obviously, for Johnny Tremain. So she became a really acclaimed author. She continued writing mostly historical novels set in New England during the colonial period, and became the first female member of the American Antiquarian Society, which is a society I don't know anything about, but has many famous members, including John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Jimmy Carter, Washington Irving, Andrew Jackson, Frederick Delano Roosevelt.
Why didn't you just say?
Why didn't I just say what?
FDR.
Well,
Like
I
you
wanted to
had
make
typed
sure,
it.
I wanted to make sure that
Anyway.
people knew.
Keep going.
Henry Louis Gates, Larry McMurtry, kind of a mixed bag, that crew, I would say, but she's the first female inductee to this society, and so good for her. She lived until 1967, and she died of heart disease, rheumatic heart disease. I don't know what that is, but she died of it. So
you like rheumatism?
But that's with joints, isn't it?
I don't know.
Anyway, she died of it.
All right.
I don't think I want to get it.
Nope.
Anyway, that's Esther.
So she had a niche, is what I'm hearing.
Her and her mom both.
Yeah.
When you talk about things running in the family, the men were lawyers, the women were pioneers in the field of colonial studies.
Yeah.
Tell us about, speaking of colonial studies,
okay.
Tell us about the plot of Johnny Tremain.
All right. So I just made like bullet points.
There's a lot that happens in this book.
There's a lot that happens. To me, it's kind of convoluted, and also I took a very long time to read it. It's not a difficult book, but I took a very long time to read it. So
it might be difficult if it were boring.
So anyway, the setting, it takes place in Boston right before the Revolutionary War has started. So there's a lot of like unrest. You have the Whigs and you have the Tories, and things are a-brewing, as you might say. Johnny Tremain, the main character, is an apprentice for a silversmith, is what you call?
I think so.
Okay, that's what I wrote, but then I started to doubt myself.
Stuff with silver.
He's very talented. He is also an orphan. Both of his parents have died. He is also kind of arrogant. He's really good at what he does, but he's mean, and he's really forceful with the other boys who are employed there. And his teacher, Mr. Lapsham, the person who he lives with, is asked to make a very fancy dish for John Hancock, a very wealthy man that we now call our signatures after. So I kind of, that's kind of a sad claim to fame that we talk about you all the time, but we're really just talking about ourselves, our own signatures. Anyway, that does not make it in the book. Right, he signed the Declaration of Independence, but so did a lot of other people. Anyway, so he's commissioned to make this very fancy silver dish for Mr. Hancock, and Mr. Lapsham is old, and he just he can teach the boys, he can mentor them, but he can't really work with silver in the same way. And so he's like, Johnny, it's up to you to do this. This would really bring us a lot of wealth. And Johnny ends up having to work on the Sabbath, which is this horrible sin, and he does it in secret. Dove, one of the kids who works there, does not like Johnny because Johnny's very mean to him. Johnny makes fun of him. Johnny's throughout the book, we know how fat Dove is, how stupid he is. Esther,
he's a real pill.
Yeah, but I don't think Esther likes Dove either because she's kind of mean about him in her characterization of him. But anyway, Dove finally decides, I'm going to humble this guy. I'm going to get back at him, and gives him a crucible that's been cracked.
And the crucible just keeps coming up.
And so, right, it is October. So as Johnny is making this silver dish, he ends up significantly burning his hand to where he can no longer be a silversmith. It is so badly damaged. So he goes out looking for jobs, and he meets this kid named Rab, who is a nephew of the owner of the Boston Observer, which is this newspaper that is a seditious newspaper that's representing Whig perspectives. So Johnny becomes very close with Rab. They become very good friends, and he considers becoming an errand boy for him. Well, Johnny's mother, before she died, swore to Johnny that she was a Light, L-Y-T-E woman, Light is the last name. She was part of this very wealthy family in Boston. She swears that she is from that family, but he cannot ask them for help unless he is completely destitute, unless he has no other options. And at this point, Johnny's I was going to be a silversmith the rest of my life. I was going to marry the owner's daughter. Like I had everything set out for me. And so he's, considers himself to be the lowest of the low. And so he has this cup that his mother has given him that she says, take this to the Light family and they will help you, but only do it if you have no other options. So he goes there and he ends up being tricked by Mr. Light. What is his name? Jonathan?
I don't know. Mr. Light.
So Mr. Light ends up accusing him of stealing the cup and takes him to court. Johnny ends up winning because he has the silversmith's daughter, Priscilla is her name, but they call her Scylla. She comes up a lot. She ends up testifying, like, no, I saw this cup before he ever went to Mr. Light's home. He couldn't have stolen it. So Johnny still, though, hasn't quite, learned that this is not a trustworthy guy. So he goes back to him later. It's like, okay, I won this court case, but if you really want my cup, I'll sell it to you. And Light just ends up stealing it back from him. So anyway, Johnny ends up going to work for the Observer, the newspaper. He becomes really, he works with the horses, and through this he becomes friends with the British soldiers so that he can pass information back and forth to the revolutionaries.
What's the name of the horse that he ends up getting?
Goblin?
Goblin. I love that name as well.
Yeah, and he's this really wild horse that he's kind of dared, oh, go ride that horse. I can't remember the whole premise of him, but riding Goblin. But he ends up really befriending this horse and being able to work with him like nobody else can. So that really works to his advantage because he gets to build relationships with both sides, which really helps the revolutionaries. He ends up participating in the Boston Tea Party. This is where it all gets kind of convoluted. So the story keeps going on. There's major plot points that will come up as we talk about things that we liked and disliked about the book. But eventually, Rab, the whole time, has been a die-hard revolutionary. Johnny's just kind of there for the vibes. It's kind of these are my friends and this is what they think I should do, so I'm going to help them in this mission. But Rab is really bought into the ideology and is really eager to fight. And so he ends up going to leave to fight in Lexington. Johnny finds out in the midst of all this that he is actually a Light and finds the genealogy in Mr. Light's Bible and ends up taking that. And then the book ends as the war begins. So
doesn't Rab get shot or something and he
yes.
gives Johnny his gun? I remember something like that.
Yes. Rab ends up dying and gives the musket that Johnny helped him get to Johnny. But really, the book just ends as you can tell that the war is about to begin. And I would say that this book is kind of a coming of age story for Johnny. And that's why I think it's named after him. But it's written upon this much broader tapestry of the Revolutionary War beginning. So I left out a lot. But why don't you talk about what you liked and then we can fill in the blanks with things that I left out.
One thing I didn't realize until I'm just now looking at this, I don't know if I really loved the illustrations, but the illustrations are these little woodcuts. And I realized that I've read books illustrated by this woodcutter before, Lynn Ward, who did, I think I've talked about this on the podcast, he did several books, like a novel in pictures, they're precursors to the graphic novel. So God's Man, or Madman's Drum. Anyway, those are very cool books, and I didn't realize he had done those until just now. I was looking at it. But in terms of things that I actually liked while I was reading it, I think that there's so much that happens in this book, and I definitely like some of the things that happen. So, for instance, I think that the sequence, the passages immediately following Johnny maiming his hand, injuring his hand, and him being out of work, I think there's some really compelling character work there, because Johnny's whole identity has been, I'm this talented silversmith. I'm going to basically inherit this like silversmith. I'm the heir to the throne of this like silversmith workshop, whatever, and that like completely scuttles his plans. And not only that, it's his hand is so injured that he has trouble finding any work at all, which is one of the reasons why he ends up at the Observer. And so I think that is like just really good character work. You have this guy who is so full of himself, and he's full of himself because he's genuinely good at this thing, but he's also kind of a little prick a little bit, and is not like kind to the people around him. And then he is like humbled and actually has to figure out, okay, now that I have a handicap, what does that mean for the world around, like my interaction with the world around me? And I think that like, to me, that is the most interesting that Johnny ever is in this book. And I think it is very interesting and very like sad and also very interesting to imagine, like, I mean, I don't think that Esther Forbes is writing with the lens of like disability fiction or things like that, but it has those kind of shades of like, okay, I have this, this disability that is is making me ill fit with the society that I'm living in, and how do I figure out how to navigate my world now that I am basically viewed as less than by people around me, and I think that's a really interesting character arc for Johnny. I think I like Rab. I like the stuff with the Observer. I think that's fun. I think that's interesting. I like some of the stuff as Johnny gets a little closer to the revolution, like spying on the British and things like that. I like that, and it makes sense with Esther Forbes' interest in colonial history. But I like how there's just like casually these like names that have these kind of mythic import now, like Paul Revere or John Hancock. And John Hancock's just Sam Adams. John Hancock is just some dude in this. Like he's just like a client of
a wealthy client.
He's a wealthy client, right? Like it makes sense that he was one of the signers of the Revolution or the Declaration of Independence. Thank you, because I'm sure he could pay other people to do work while he was busy writing that thing or signing that thing, right? But I do think that like it convincingly evokes like a kind of social fabric in which these are just people who exist as real people rather than like as mythological figures. Like it, sometimes with historical fiction books, like someone shows up and they're like, wow, look, it's John Hancock. I love his handwriting or whatever, like, and they do stuff like that where they really lay it on thick about like that. And you do get some of that, like Paul Revere does his ride, for instance, later on in this book.
But they kind of downplay it.
That's exactly what I'm saying is it's not this kind of like starry-eyed, like, they appear with a like backlit, and with a choir when they show up. And I like that. I like how it's just some people, right? And I think of all the wars that America has fought, perhaps none other than like World War II is as mythologized as like the Revolutionary War. And unlike World War II, it's so far in the past that I think a lot of people don't know, including myself, don't know a lot of the specifics outside of the mythology. Mm-hmm. And I just like that it's it's in a lot of ways it's just mundane. It's like, okay, John Hancock won a plate. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, what'd you like about it?
I also agreed, like, Johnny grappling with his disability is a really, like, moving part of the story. I don't know that I love that people view it as, like, it's almost like his employers see it as, like, God's curse that he was working on the Sabbath.
I'll get to the things that this also intersects things.
Yeah, it's like a little bit complicated when you think about disability and do we view disability as like people's sins that are now being punished. But anyway, I think that like those are really compelling, like thought-provoking parts of the story. I think we've all had those moments where we've banked our life or like identity in something, and then all of that is torn apart, and then we have to figure out what our next move is. And so I think that was a really moving part of the story. I think his friendship with Rab is wonderful, and within that, you can tell that Johnny has a very deep affection for Rab. I think you could also like read this through a queer lens if you wanted to with like that relationship,
He
but
certainly doesn't end up with the girl.
well, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's there. Maybe not intentionally, but
Well, that's
I
what I'm
think,
saying is that, like,
yeah.
at the beginning of the book, he's like, I'm going to marry Scylla or whatever, and then it never really works out.
Right, and I think part of that is based on like he's this damaged guy now, right? That doesn't have like the same means of income and anyway, again, as I'm talking, I want to talk about the things that I disliked, but that's not the point of this right now. But in that, he definitely has this very deep affection for Rab, and I think Rab cares about Johnny, but not in the same way. Rab is very much, like I said in the beginning, like bought in to this ideology of like American freedom and the revolution. And so I think Johnny views his role in it very much as like devotion to his friends. Like I think he believes in the cause, but it's also very much like these are people that, picked me up out of the trenches and like have given me an income and a home and friends and community. Of course I'm going to fight for them.
Well, I
And
think
then
that like
Rab,
squares with, we always view the revolution through the writings of like Thomas Jefferson or, all these people, Thomas Paine, all the kind of, but those guys were the ideologues, right?
Right.
And the war was not fought by ideologues.
Right.
The war was fought by just random, like, everyday people.
Yeah. So in the midst of this much larger war going on, Rab decides like he's going to go and fight. And then Johnny is left to be like, how could he leave me? How could he just abandon me here? And he's really grappling with the loss of his friend. And that maybe that friendship didn't mean as much to Rab as it did to Johnny. And so I just think like that really honest portrayal of like just the difficulty of relationship in the midst of this much larger thing going on. I think it was very honest and moving, and I thought it was really well done. And then also his relationship with Dove, which I don't think is ever good. I don't think is ever healthy, but he realizes that like Dove is like really devoted to the British Empire, but it seems that he's more devoted to the British Empire because he thinks that's what he's supposed to do. But these soldiers don't respect him. They're very mean to him. They bully him. And Johnny just can't bear like witnessing that, even though Johnny bullies him too.
He's like, I'm supposed to be the one who bullies him.
There is this comparison made in like the book. It's kind of like an older sibling that when someone else picks on them, like. But I do think the British soldiers are very unkind to Dove, not just like harsh with him like Johnny. There seems to be a lot of bullying there, and so Johnny and Rab actually like befriend him and. He finds some reconciliation with Dove. I don't think it's ever like complete, but he kind of recognizes like the social hurdles that Dove has had to overcome, and that at the end of the day, he's longing to just find a home and companionship like Johnny. And so I think that there was some inner dialogue that was provided there that was like insightful. And then. There is this British soldier named Pumpkin, and all he wants in life is to be a farmer. And so Johnny works with him to get some farmer's clothes and a wig and to like trade his musket. I think, if I'm right, that's how Rab gets the musket, right?
That sounds right.
It's Pumpkin's. So anyway, he helps him escape, but he is ultimately discovered, and Johnny has to witness him being shot by a firing squad. And it's a very sad, moving scene. And, Johnny has built like friendships with these British soldiers, not like in a way that he's like actually their friends, but in a way to like find out what's going on behind the scenes and to figure out plans. But you can also tell that he has like a sort of like respect for some of them. And also like there's very much this. Oh, these are just like young guys who are drinking beer and riding horses, and they're kind of like letting the colonialists do what they want, until it comes down to like this is actually a war, And when there's a deserter, like the dignified and the friendly are the exact opposite of that. And the really honest, innocent aims of just wanting to become a farmer become the grounds for murder. And so I think like the best parts of this book really have nothing to do with the war, but just showing like um, the relationships that are built and torn apart within this larger framework, I think are well done. And those are the things that I appreciated about it.
Yeah, I agree.
What did you dislike?
Well, so I don't know. I think we should probably talk first about Johnny as a character, who I think I talked about his relationship with his disability is an arc that I thought was really compelling, which I think is true. I don't think that Johnny Tremain has a good arc throughout the entire book. Like, I think there are places where he has really interesting relationships and stuff like that, like you talked about, or like his relationship with his, his own body or things like that. But I think that, like, I struggled to find a focus for Johnny as a character, and there are times in which he's just kind of like seems to be going through one thing after another without there being a through line of like, how is this developing him psychologically? Like, he finds his place in terms of like his usefulness, right? So there's a kind of utilitarian, like, I know what I'm for now, But in terms of what does that mean for him psychologically, like, I think a lot of the big interesting psychological questions that are raised by some of the beginning, like his arrogance and unkindness, and like his disability and things like that, like, after a certain point, the book seems to lose interest in those things. And I feel like what it replaces them with are not very interesting. Like, he just starts, you get intermittently interesting scenes, like the scene with Pumpkin, and, and at the end, like with Rab and things like that. But like, by the end, Johnny Tremain is just like a guy. Like, he doesn't seem, and he never really, we talk about his arrogance at the beginning, and his arrogance is tied to his ability as a silversmith, and he kind of looks down on people, but he never really changes from that, except that he just finds new things he's good at. And I don't know, like, I don't need like a character to like become like a morally pure person by the end of the novel. But like, I thought it was interesting, the tension between his arrogance and like his struggle to find his place once he had become disabled. And that tension goes away once he finds his place, but he's still kind of a jerk. And I don't know if this is just like a difference in how like I expect people to be now versus like how Esther Forbes understands people to be in colonial America, or how people in the 1940s understand people to be, or whatever. But like, I struggled to track what is the kind of exigency of like his psychology that is driving him the rest of the book. Like, once he gets established with the Whigs, and once he gets established with the Observer, it's just like, here, I'm helping with this one thing with the Whigs. Now I'm helping with another thing.
Yes.
Now I'm helping with another thing. And there's not any cohesion. And I feel like the strongest part of the book is the first half. And when you get to the second half, it's just kind of like a one thing after another without, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of him as a character anymore. And I also think the interesting stuff, it doesn't resolve. It merely kind of wipes away. And even by the end, you didn't mention this, but by the end, he undergoes a surgery that like repairs his hand.
Well, he's going to.
And so now he's able-bodied, he's going to be able to fight in the revolution or whatever. And that makes sense in a certain way. But it also means that all that stuff about like, I don't know how I fit in anymore, and I don't know what I'm good at anymore, goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And
it also just felt like a very ableist conclusion to something that could have been otherwise. Like, ultimately his worth is regained because he learned a lesson and now his hand is fixed. Is what it feels like.
And I don't love that. Like, I like on a kind of cosmic level that he is arrogant and then he is humiliated by an accident.
Yeah.
And because I think that leads to interesting character things. but I don't like the kind of moralistic framework of, well, now that he's learned his lesson and has become like a functional member of society again, he gets to have the function of his hand back. Like that seems like a weird, and it's also just thrown in at the end of the story. Like it feels like the story could have ended without that, and it would have been almost the same. It would have been even more interesting, I think, if he had come up with, how can I participate in the Revolutionary War without a hand with only one hand that I can use?
Yeah.
And it just feels like,
because clearly he was a big participant before that.
Right, and it feels like not only is it this weird moral framework that I think doesn't really jive with me and how I view the world, but also by having this moral framework, it leaves the interesting stuff that could have come out of this on the table without having been picked up. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree.
I also think that the book just gets increasingly interested in the history by the end, which makes sense given Esther Forbes' career. But to me, it loses track of like I mentioned, it loses track of the characters. For instance, the family he's with at the beginning, like Celia and Scylla or whatever, they just kind of fade away a little bit. And again, that's a big part of the early parts of the book. And it has the feeling of like, when you watch a TV show for long enough, you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, this person was a main character for a while, and then they just became a guest star or whatever. And that's kind of how it feels like some of these characters go, where it's like we just are far enough away from them that they just kind of fade out, rather than something interesting happening with them. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. The thing I wrote down, what I disliked, is that it's not focused or like direct enough, especially toward the end. There's just so much going on, and like all these little subplots that don't really connect to each other, and not even, I would say, for Johnny's like character development, if that's what she's trying to do. Like, it kind of felt like she didn't know what to do with like these stories that she had started in the beginning. I also, this again could be that I just took a very long time to read this, but I lost sense of names at several points. Like, I don't know, there just seems to be like a lot of characters, unnecessarily so. And then one thing that we haven't talked about is like, so there are there's more than two sisters, but the two sisters that Johnny spends the most time with are Priscilla or Scylla, and then Isana, which is the younger sibling. And Isana has like, again, with the ableist stuff, has like always been the daughter who's been very sickly and poorly, and when she would get sick, like Scylla would try to like take care of her. She and Johnny would try to take care of her on her own because her mom would be so overwhelmed with her illness that it was almost like, I shouldn't have even ever had this daughter because she's not worth
they say something like that
too. Yeah, like it's really horrible. And I don't think that Esther thinks that, but like the way that I don't like at all Isana's framework, because you can tell that she's never really had proper care from a caregiver. And so she's got attachment issues, right? Like she's got trauma. And so the way that she like builds a relationship with Priscilla, because she's the one that like takes care of her and provides for her, well then somehow, I can't even remember how, they end up going to live with the Light family that we've been talking about, that like cheated Johnny out of his cup and like tried to put him in jail or whatever. They end up working for the daughter of Mr. Light, Lavinia Light, which Johnny's like obsessed with this woman the whole book, and we don't ever know why, except that she's pretty, and I don't know what the point of it
Maybe
is.
she's just like a hot rich woman.
I know, but like she just wanted to hit home so much that Johnny had a crush on this woman and was enamored with her, but then nothing really ever happens with that. But anyway,
it's like a Kardashian in Boston and colonies.
Must be. So anyway, Lavinia takes these daughters under her wing and ends up being very attached to Isana because Isana will like follow her and do what she wants. I think that Isana is being like sexually abused by this woman and like the men in her home. Well, I just mean like there's this whole scene where Johnny walks in and like Lavinia is using Isana as like sexual entertainment for these men. Like, she barely has on any clothes. She's like performing for them. They're like giving her all this attention. Like, it's very subtle, but there's something sexual going on here with this child. And Johnny walks in and he sees that Isana like has no clothes on, and is like, oh, her father would just turn over in his grave, and then comes and slaps the heck out of her. Like,
right. I do
when
remember
it's
the
like
scene
clearly she's a pawn for these rich, powerful people. And like, you're worried about her morality. When she is like the most vulnerable person in this situation, I hated it. I was very upset by it. And I don't think that like Esther sees any problem with Johnny's treatment of this girl.
Or if she does, she doesn't really explore it. I think that's
No.
a lot of it, is that like, for me, a lot of these things are potentially really interesting, but the book doesn't really do a lot with them because it's so scattered, jumping around to all these different things. Like, it is a very, to me, potentially interesting that Johnny Tremain has this like sense of like ownership over Isana and views Isana's complicity, or not even complicity, but her cooperation with these awful rich people, like that he would view that as worse than the rich people themselves. Like, that is like an interesting character dynamic and could potentially tie in with like his interaction with the lights and things like that. But it doesn't get dramatically worked out. Like, it's just that one scene and then it's just on to something else.
Yeah, so I think that really sums up my frustrations with this book. It's like there are like some really well done scenes, but like on the large of it, I just think there's a lot of loose ends that are just there to be there, and I don't like it.
Yeah, and for me, it feels like the loose ends are, the back half of the book is just a lot less disciplined than the first half. Like, the first half is very precise in a lot of ways, and then as the scope of the novel gets bigger and bigger, the characters and pacing and the like kind of just dramatic like ligature just becomes like looser and looser to the point of it kind of loses what the first half had.
Yeah, so thumbs down for me.
Yeah, I was actually thinking I was going to give this thumbs up until I finished the book, and now I'm thumbs down because I do think the back half just, like I said, drops the ball on a lot of things that were interesting.
One thing we didn't bring up is Johnny's widow's peak that comes up throughout the book.
Iconically represented on the cover illustration too, like full force, like this widow's peak.
You say widower's peak?
Or widows, which is it?
I say widow's peak.
I also say that too. I feel like, to me, they're interchangeable terms, but
anyway, this is not podcast interesting.
Widow's peak? Maybe not widower's peak. Anyway, it seems like widow's peak is the more conventional one.
So if you disagree with us, tell us what you liked.
Newberrychronicles@gmail.com.
Tell us what you agree with us about too. But our next book.
So we're in the 1950s again. And the 1954 Newbery Medal winning book is this book called ... and Now Miguel. There's an ellipses at the beginning. I don't know how that goes for alphabetizing the book.
I don't know.
But it's by Joseph Crumgold.
And know that Michael and I get very annoyed by people that use ellipses incorrectly. So
use ellipses when they should use commas or dashes.
Yes.
Whatever the case, we'll weigh in on the use of an ellipses in this title next time when we discuss And Now Miguel. Until then, like we mentioned, let us know any thoughts you have, newberrychronicles@gmail.com. And, anything else to recommend?
Nope. Thanks for listening.
All right. Talk to you guys later.